You know that really specific, almost universal feeling of dread that hits you when you decide you want to learn a massive new skill.
Oh, yeah. Like absolute sheer panic.
Right. Think about like the last time you decided to learn a foreign language. You buy the heavy textbook, you download the app, you stare at this list of, I don't know, 10,000 words you apparently need to know.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately your brain just shuts down. It's that ultimate mountain staring moment, you know?
Surely.
You're standing at the bottom, the peak is hidden somewhere up in the clouds, and you just think, I can't possibly climb that.
Because it's cognitive overload in its purest form.
Hmm.
I mean, when you look at the entirety of the new language or any vast subject, really the sheer volume is enough to just paralyze you.
Yeah, we completely freeze.
Right, because we simply aren't wired to process that level of complexity all at once. The working memory gets flooded, and your brain's natural defense mechanism is to just, hit the brakes.
Hit the brakes, exactly. But what if the antidote to that paralysis is, wait for it, pizza dough? Pizza dough.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I mean, I see where we're going, but let's unpack how baking connects to cognitive load.
So today we are doing a deep dive into a really fascinating approach to microlearning. We've got our hands on a transcript from a daily 10-minute language learning show.
Right, the one hosted by Sarah and James.
Exactly, Sarah and James.
Here.
And they teach foundational A1 level English. And right at the top of this particular session, they throw out this brilliant metaphor. They tell their students that building a language is like making a pizza.
Mm-hmm.
You need the dough first. No dough, no pizza, no foundational vocabulary, well, no English.
It's a remarkably grounding way to frame the learning process, really, because they're stripping away the pressure of mastering the entire language and forcing the focus onto just the absolute raw materials.
Right. And our mission today isn't just to, read off the 10 specific A1 vocabulary words they cover. I mean, we all know what an apple or an adult is.
Sure.
Instead, we're going to examine why Sarah and James use these exact 10 words as their vital building blocks. We're going to dig into the pedagogy behind it. And even more importantly, we're going to scrutinize their claim that just 10 minutes of this kind of daily practice can take you all the way from A1 basic proficiency to C1 fluency in a single year.
Which, I have to say, sounds like a marketing gimmick at first glance.
It totally does.
But if we break down the math and the neurobiology behind it, the trajectory they're mapping out is surprisingly solid.
Well, let's jump into the dough then. They kick things off with 3 words establishing physical space, right? About, above, and across.
The spatial words.
Yeah. Now, they're very careful with the word about. They note it has dozens of uses, but they strictly fence it in for the A1 learner to just mean on the subject of, like, this book is about animals, or that classic conversational opener, tell me about yourself.
Which is incredibly strategic. I mean, they're giving the learner the highest leverage application of the word right off the bat.
Right. And then they move to above, meaning higher than something. So the ceiling is above your head. The second floor is above the first. And finally, across, which introduces movement from one side to another or being directly opposite, like walking across the street or sitting across from a friend at a restaurant.
Yeah, sitting across from someone.
But here's where I need you to help me make sense of this pedagogy. Why on earth would you start an A1 language course with spatial prepositions? Like, why not start with the really basic, tangible nouns? Apple, dog, chair. Is there a psychological reason they prioritize these spatial concepts over physical objects?
There's actually a profound linguistic reason for it, and it ties into a concept called embodied cognition.
Embodied cognition.
Right. Think of nouns like apple or dog as individual bricks. You can have a massive pile of bricks, but without mortar, you can't build a wall. Spatial words, these prepositions act as the mortar.
Okay.
Because human cognition is fundamentally rooted in our physical bodies moving through space.
Yeah. So we have to understand our physical environment before we can communicate anything else.
Exactly. Before we can articulate complex, abstract thoughts, our brains need to map out where things are and how they relate to one another physically.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Notice how even our abstract concepts rely on spatial words. We say we're feeling down, or things are looking up, or we're moving past a problem.
Oh, I never thought about that.
Right. If you only know 100 nouns, you're just pointing and naming things like a toddler, apple, dog. But if you have words like about, above, and across, you suddenly have syntax. You can explain that the book about the dog is on the shelf above the desk across the room. Spatial words give you the relationships between the things.
Okay, that reframes it completely. It isn't just about knowing objects. It's about navigating the world that those objects exist in.
Precisely.
And if human cognition is based on our bodies moving through space, the logical next step is the actual movement itself, which is exactly where Sarah and James take the lesson next. They move from spatial mapping to the concept of doing things.
Right, they tackle the words action and activity.
Yeah. And this specific pairing is where their teaching method really shines, I think, because they aren't just teaching vocabulary.
No, they're preemptively fixing a very common cognitive trap for beginners.
Because action and activity sound almost identical, especially to a non-native ear.
They do. They share the same root.
But they draw a hard line between them. They break action down as a noun representing the raw act of doing, moving, or making things happen.
It's the opposite of waiting or thinking.
Right. They bring up action movies, loud music, running, fighting, and the classic director's cue, lights, camera, action.
And then they contrast that directly with activity. They define an activity as a specific, named thing that you do. It's often planned or for fun.
Like swimming.
Exactly. Swimming is an activity. Reading is an activity. Popping your headphones in to listen to a daily audio show is an activity.
Let me try out an analogy here because I want to make sure I'm capturing the real nuance of their lesson.
Go for it.
If I'm looking at this mechanically, action feels like raw energy. It's the engine of a car running, the pistons firing, the potential for movement.
Okay, I like that.
But an activity is the specific road trip you're taking with that energy, like driving to the beach.
Right, that's perfect. And if we take that engine analogy further, handing someone the word action without distinguishing it from activity is like telling them to pour gasoline directly onto the seats instead of into the tank.
That would be a disaster.
It would. And A1 learners constantly mix these up. They'll say something like, swimming is my favorite action. To a native speaker, that sounds totally jarring.
Yeah, it sounds robotic, like an alien trying to blend in.
It does. By defining action as the philosophical concept of doing, and activity as the categorized task, Sarah and James are saving the learner from years of habitual errors. Linguists call this fossilization.
Fossilization, where a mistake just gets baked into your brain.
Exactly. It's a subtle distinction, but giving the learner that conceptual clarity early on is the difference between eventually sounding fluent versus just being barely understood.
It's empowering, really. You're giving them the blueprint of how the language operates under the hood. So, okay, we've established spatial relationships, we've defined the concepts of energy and movement. The natural progression is to look at who is actually executing these actions.
The people.
The people. And Sarah and James pivot right into categorizing the people in our world with 3 words: actor, actress, and adult.
This segment is fascinating from a cultural standpoint.
Right.
They start by defining an actor specifically as a man who performs in movies or theater, mentioning Tom Hanks and Leonardo DiCaprio.
That's right. And then actress defined as a female performer, like Meryl Streep. Obviously, our listeners don't need these words defined for them. But what caught my attention was the stealth cultural education embedded right in the middle of a basic A1 lesson.
You're referring to how they handle the gender politics of the terminology.
Exactly, because it is a whole thing right now. They explicitly note that in modern English, it's becoming standard practice to use the word actor for everyone, regardless of gender.
Right.
But rather than enforcing a strict rule, they reassure the learner that actress is still entirely correct, widely understood, and very common. They even point out that the Oscars still strictly divide their categories into Best Actor and Best Actress.
It's an incredibly pragmatic way to teach. Language isn't static. It's a living, breathing, evolving ecosystem.
Yeah.
And navigating a language in transition is a nightmare for a new learner.
Yeah.
Do I use the traditional term? Do I use the progressive, gender-neutral term? Will I offend someone? Will I sound out of touch?
It adds so much social anxiety to the learning process. Like, I'm just trying to say, I went to the movies.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And anxiety spikes the affective filter in the brain, which literally blocks language acquisition. What Sarah and James do here is brilliantly diffuse that tension. They give the student permission to understand both terms and recognize that neither is going to ruin a conversation. They're optimizing for real-world communication, not textbook perfection.
Speaking of the real world, that brings us to the word adult. They define it as a fully grown person, 18 or older, but instead of just leaving it at the biological definition, they juxtapose the 2 realities of adulthood.
Right, the pros and cons.
Yeah. On one hand, you have freedom. You decide what to eat, where to go, what podcasts to listen to. But on the other hand, they joke about the harsh reality. Adulting is expensive.
The movie ticket example.
Yes, I loved that. They talk about going to the cinema. The child ticket is $7, but the adult ticket is $12. If you're 30, you have to pay the adult price. I actually laughed out loud reading the transcript because that universal pain of paying bills and adult prices just hits so close to home.
It's funny, but it's also a highly engineered mnemonic device.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Memory isn't just about repetition. It's heavily reliant on emotional tagging in the hippocampus. When you can connect a new, abstract vocabulary word to a visceral emotion, you already understand, like, the mild annoyance of paying a $12 cover charge.
Right, the adult tax.
Exactly. That word gets fast-tracked from short-term working memory into long-term storage.
They're essentially hacking your brain. They're making you relate to the struggle of everyday life so the vocabulary sticks. Which leads perfectly into the final pair of words for this session, because as adults, we spend most of our time navigating society.
We do.
We combine things, we make connections, and we figure out where we're going. And the words they use to anchor this are add and address.
Let's look at add. The core definition is simply to put things together or increase something.
Right.
But notice how they demonstrate its versatility. They're utilizing a concept similar to Zipf's law, focusing on high-frequency, multi-context words.
They give 3 distinct applications, which I thought was great. First, the literal math, 2 + 2 = 4. Then, physical daily life, adding salt to soup or sugar to coffee. And finally, the modern social application, add me on Instagram. Or the incredibly polite interjection for a business meeting, can I add something?
That phrase, can I add something, is pure gold for a beginner.
It really is.
It's a low-risk, high-reward phrase that allows a non-native speaker to participate in a complex conversation without needing a massive vocabulary to assert themselves. It provides social friction relief.
It's a total superpower phrase. But I actually think the most profound pedagogical moment in this entire transcript happens with the final word, address.
Ah, yes.
They teach the basic definition, the information detailing where you live, your street name, number, city, like giving your address for an online shopping delivery.
But the brilliance is in what they actively choose not to teach.
Yes, I was hoping you'd catch that, because James brings up that address has a more advanced meaning as a verb. For example, the president addressed the nation, meaning to speak to an audience formally, but the second he introduces it, he explicitly tells the learner to completely ignore it. He says that meaning is for higher levels. Right now, at A1, address only equals where you live.
It requires an immense amount of restraint for an educator to do that. The natural temptation for any expert is the curse of knowledge. You want to explain every exception, every nuance, every alternate definition to prove the completeness of the language.
But doing that to a beginner is exactly what causes that mountain-staring paralysis we talked about at the beginning. If I'm trying to learn where to mail a package, I don't need a lecture on presidential speeches.
Exactly. It's the ultimate application of cognitive load theory. If you overload a student's working memory with too many variations of a single concept, the encoding process completely breaks down.
Wow.
By explicitly telling the listener, here's a complex meaning, but you have my full permission to ignore it, they are actively managing the student's cognitive burden. It's anti-overload teaching. It builds confidence by artificially shrinking the mountain.
It makes you feel like, okay, I can handle this. It really is just pizza dough.
Exactly.
But that brings us to the final and arguably most critical philosophy in Sarah and James's method. Knowing the definitions of about, above, across, action, activity, actor, actress, adult, add, and address, that's great.
It is.
But internalizing a list of 10 words doesn't make you fluent. They close out their session by abandoning grammar entirely and pivoting to the psychology of consistency.
They lay out the math of micro-learning. 10 words a day. If you learn just 10 words every single day, that's 3,650 new words in a year.
I have to push back on this a little bit, though, because can a 10-minute daily habit really take someone from knowing nothing to full C1 fluency? That sounds almost too easy. Aren't we told that language immersion requires hours of grueling daily study?
That's a very common misconception. Linguistically speaking, a vocabulary of around 3,000 to 4,000 high-frequency words covers about 90 to 95% of everyday spoken language.
Wait, really? Just 3,000 words?
Yes. It's the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, applied to linguistics. You don't need to know 50,000 words to be fluent. You just need to deeply know the right 3,500 words. But the mechanism of how you acquire them is what matters.
And Sarah and James are incredibly emphatic about that mechanism. They urge the listener to integrate this 10-minute habit into the margins of their day.
The margins, yes.
They aren't asking you to clear your schedule and sit at a desk under a lamp for 2 hours every evening. They want you listening while you're at the gym, while you're taking a walk, sitting in traffic on your commute, or just taking a short coffee break at work.
And the analogy Sarah uses perfectly encapsulates the neuroscience of spaced repetition. She compares daily language learning to brushing your teeth.
Right. You don't skip brushing your teeth Monday through Saturday and then aggressively brush them for an hour on Sunday to make up for it. Your dentist would be horrified.
And your neurobiology responds the exact same way. A massive, exhausting 3-hour study session once a week is highly inefficient for long-term memory retention.
No, totally. You're just going to burn out.
Right. And thanks to the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, we know that if you don't encounter information repeatedly in small doses, your brain assumes it's irrelevant and prunes the neural connection.
It just deletes it.
Essentially, yes. Fluency requires the repeated daily firing of those specific pathways. It has to be an automatic, non-negotiable daily habit.
Just 10 minutes.
Yeah?
But it has to be every single day. Which is why it's so crucial, and this applies whether you're learning English, a new programming language, or financial literacy, to eliminate the friction. You have to subscribe to the daily content. You need to turn the notifications on.
Absolutely. If you have to wake up and actively remember to go search for today's lesson, you've already introduced too much friction. The habit will break.
Exactly. You want it delivered straight to your phone so you never miss those crucial 10 minutes. You're outsourcing the discipline of remembering to your technology, which frees up all your mental energy for the actual learning.
Right.
You just hit play while you're walking the dog, and the compounding interest does the rest.
It's a profound shift in how we approach self-improvement, really. We idolize the grand, sweeping efforts. But the reality of human neuroplasticity is that we are shaped by the tiny, relentless routines we maintained in the margins of our lives.
So let's take a step back and look at the foundation we've poured today. We started by understanding that language needs the raw materials, the pizza dough.
The dough.
We explored how spatial building blocks like above and across aren't just vocabulary. They're the essential mortar connecting our abstract thoughts to the physical world.
And we dissected the vital, often confused distinction between the raw, conceptual energy of an action and the specific, categorized task of an activity.
We navigated the social complexities of the adult world, too. We looked at how teaching words like actor versus actress can smoothly introduce evolving cultural norms, and how the universal pain of expensive cinema tickets acts as an emotional memory hack.
Not to mention how the brilliant restraint of ignoring advanced definitions like a presidential address protects the learner from cognitive overload.
And tying it all together is the sheer, compounding mathematical power of microlearning. 10 words a day, 3,650 words a year. The quiet, unstoppable force of consistent daily effort.
It really is unstoppable if you just stick to it.
Which really leaves you with a broader question to chew on. We started out talking about that familiar, paralyzing dread you feel when you face a massive mountain of a goal. But if just 10 minutes a day, squeezed into a morning commute or a walk around the block, yields over 3,500 vocabulary words and takes a person from absolute beginner to true fluency in a single year.
It makes you wonder.
It does. What other monumental, seemingly impossible goals in your life are secretly just waiting for a 10-minute daily habit?